It's called the supreme spectacle, yet nothing prepares you for the grandeur of the Grand Canyon. From exposed rock, millions of years in the making,
bring on the river,
to the powerful blast of a river unleashed. Over the next hour, we'll travel from rim to hike hidden canyons, plunge into ancient pools, and giddy up and go to get an insider's view of one of the wonders of the world. Stretching as far as 18 miles from rim to rim, the Grand Canyon spreads across the northwest corner of Arizona. Each year, millions of visitors from all over the world come to view the stair-step labyrinth of monoliths, where the ever-changing patterns of color and light are an inspiration. Many experienced canyoneers get their bearings from the multitude of rocky peaks called temples. Some have exotic names like Osiris, Buddha, and Zoroaster, after Eastern deities and religions.
Well, there's over 100 named peaks and temples and buttes here, any one of which, in my humble opinion, you could pluck out of the canyon, set down in the middle of Kansas, and you'd have a national monument in its own right.
Described as a gigantic Venus flytrap, this vertical park, with a 1-mile drop to the bottom, draws people in. The minute you step off the rim, it's a rugged environment where distances are deceptive.
People tend to underestimate the canyon and how far things really are. For instance, behind me here is Plateau Point. It is 6 miles one way from the beginning of the trail. And most people, if you ask them on the top, think it's about 1.5 to 2 miles down the trail.
For those who want to explore the extreme backcountry with people in the know,
watch your footing, because it's kind of a little bit loose.
The Grand Canyon Field Institute has been working with the park since the 1990s. Multi-day guided hikes allow time to delve deeper.
Every one of these is probably a fossil. It's just that one still has the pattern in it.
Then, it's off to places where there's a whole new perspective. While the spectacular view draws the eye outward, you might not be aware of a parallel world of wildlife. The bobcat, named for its short bob tail, blends into the red rock. For over 100 years, getting to the top and bottom of it has meant hopping aboard another local. These long-eared taxis have been used for hauling supplies and human cargo since the 1890s. This is one of a few places where you'll find working mules. A cross between a donkey and a horse, the unique breeding makes them ideal for the job. And they bring their own personalities to it.
A lot of mules will be real sweet and gentle.
Okay.
And you'll come across some other mules that might be a little more ornery.
Come on, Joe. Get up here.
We have ambitious mules here. We have lazy mules here. They're a lot different, just like my crew.
The South Rim Blacksmith Shop and Mule Barn date back to 1906. Saddles here are still made the old-fashioned way.
We do all our sewing by hand. It holds up better. It's the same kind of saddle that was used 100 years ago.
And shoes are required. no mule is allowed to go into the canyon without them. A blacksmith keeps them shod, a traditional task he claims doesn't hurt.
The mule's hoof's made out of the same thing your fingernail's made out of. The only thing you can really screw up and affect them is if you don't level the foot right. They'll get cracks in their foot. They're more likely to stumble.
Once they're shod and saddled, they're good to go. But before they take on a paying customer, all mules go to school. Wranglers ride them up to 3 years to make sure they adapt to people and death-defying heights.
You can think of me as your drill sergeant.
Every morning, riders get a briefing that spells out what to expect.
You're going to get uncomfortable. You're going to get hot and sweaty and achy and sore and smell like a mule smells.
It may not seem like several hours in the saddle can be a workout, but unless you're seasoned, a mule trip is hard on the body.
3-foot gap, folks, nose to tail.
While it seems like these mules take to the edge, truth be told, they're just trying to avoid rubbing up against the rocky walls. At the bottom of the canyon, the Kaibab suspension bridge keeps everyone high and dry above the rush of the Colorado River. The bridge and a connecting tunnel were built in the 1920s. But the workers miscalculated, and the two sides of the tunnel didn't meet up quite right, making the entrance completely dark. Mules and people have to adapt to it. At the end of the trail, tucked away amid the cottonwood trees, those who book ahead can look forward to a stay at Phantom Ranch. Named after a creek, the rustic retreat, made of native wood and uncut river rocks, is part of an idyllic setting. Accommodations are Spartan, and meals are served up family style. Yet a stay at Phantom goes way beyond comfort.
A lot of people come here for a variety of reasons. Some people come here for the physical challenge. Some people come here just to get away from the hustle and bustle of the cities. You don't really know what you're going to find until you come here. And a lot of people walk away very different people after they have visited Phantom.
This oasis at the bottom of the Grand Canyon is truly a special spot. Coming up, Creatures of the Canyon. And Bring on the River.
I'm really looking forward to it because I get to play.
When Inside Grand Canyon National Park continues. It's called America's Most Scenic Treasure. While you may think of Grand Canyon National Park as one major canyon, at over 1.2 million acres, there's much more than meets the eye.
Grand Canyon, as we know it, is huge. And so really, yeah, there's this little tiny ribbon of corridor, inner gorge corridor that we would say is the Colorado River. And then there's this massive area outside of it.
The canyon and its complex maze of interconnecting side canyons tell the story of the Earth.
One story is the actual development of all these sediments that we see here. Whether you're in the inner gorge where there's all these granites and metamorphic rocks, which are really the roots to mountain ranges that were huge and now have been eroded off. So the development of all these layers that we see here is one story. Then the second story is the very young one. The second story is, well, there happens to be a river cutting over this material, and it's helping to erode it all away. Fueled
by snowmelt and rainfall, and propelled by gravity, many bodies of water converge to make the Colorado River mighty. Treacherous rapids and a long history of adventurers make running the Grand Canyon a trip of a lifetime.
Colorado was always something that I really, really wanted to do. It was kind of like the epic journey.
There are many ways to tackle this epic journey.
I'm going to take on the river in a kayak. You can roll it. If you get knocked over, you can come right back up. And so I'm really looking forward to it because I get to play.
You can opt to run the river in a wooden, hard-hulled boat called a dory.
These things are meant to just basically touch water and air. When these boats go up on the big waters down in the Grand Canyon, the waves can be anywhere from 4 to 25 feet tall. So it's a more visceral ride.
Visceral rides are what it's about, no matter what type of boat you're on. The Lee's Ferry launch at the eastern end of the Grand Canyon is where it all begins.
My home for the next 18 days, 19 days. I'm excited.
The camaraderie is catching. More than 22,000 people raft the Colorado River each year, all regulated by the National Park Service.
We'll take brown bags first, and it doesn't matter which boat your brown bag goes on.
Grand Canyon Expeditions has been a regular on the river for over 4 decades.
Your ammo can you're going to want to put on the boat that you ride on.
Their most popular trip is on an inflatable rig called a baloney boat for its shape.
Everybody go ahead and grab a jacket.
Loosen me up a little bit more.
Okay, remember my first rule, don't fall off the boat.
With everyone on board, it's time to bring on the river.
What we're at is the top of the Grand Canyon. The Colorado River here has come already some 1,000 miles from up high in the Rocky Mountains. It's just crossed the Utah-Arizona border, and now it's going to start plunging into the Grand Canyon. What we're seeing here is the first riffle. It's the first rapid. And for tourists, this is wonderful. For riverboat people, it's kind of first place you start to get wet, but it's really nothing compared to what we all will see as we go further into the canyon.
From the water, the Great Gorge narrows. As it draws you in deeper, life becomes day after day after day of Grand Canyon. But the early explorers didn't come here for recreation. The legendary one-armed Civil War veteran John Wesley Powell led the first expedition in 1869.
He was doing his mapping and a surveying of the Grand Canyon at that time. Prior to that, the whole area was a blank spot on the map with only conjecture as to where the river flowed.
1938 was the year of the first commercial trips. Back then, mostly men tested their mettle, but it was a maverick boat woman who popularized commercial river running. Georgie White Clark was the first woman to ever row the rapids. But she made an even bigger splash with her innovative design for a new kind of craft, one made of Army surplus rafts.
Georgie took 3 of those long donuts and lashed them together. And that way she could carry a lot of people. And so the trips were really cheap. And Georgie was quite a character. She owned her own company. She ran her own boats.
Clark called her motorized pontoon rafts G-rigs. What you see today is a variation of Georgie's design. The river drops nearly 2,000 feet in elevation as it moves through the Grand Canyon. A plummet that accelerates the current.
what we're seeing here is a typical scenario. You notice how we have some boiling areas. There's white water, and you can see that there's kind of a curl to it. And if you have a huge curl, that means there's a huge boulder under there. The water is going over that and curling back. On a small raft, you want to avoid those things because they can actually suck you down in, they can spin you around. You'll see down the middle there's a ridge. That's called the tongue. The water is funneling down in and it's roaring down the high energy part of this rapid. That can be an area of a lot of fun and an area that's entirely frightening, and that's where you get the biggest waves.
With waves and holes that can suck you in, both men and women learn to respect the rapids and to read the river.
The rocks are placed in, very, very bad places in some cases, and you have to do difficult moves to get around the rocks. And people may not even realize what you're doing. Half the time I'd say they don't realize that you're back there, sweating bullets.
But it's not all about whitewater. There's plenty of time to explore side canyons that are sculpted to perfection. Or to take a plunge into an ancient pool. As dusk approaches, camps set up along the inner gorge. Camouflaged against a rock, a rattler moves out of the way. And a beaver on a mission makes the most of the last light as the canyon dissolves into night. Days on the river begin at dawn to beat the heat. Boatmen multitasking as cooks make sure everyone fuels up.
Hot coffee!
Indeed. Cowboy coffee.
Along the 277-mile course through the Grand Canyon, there are dozens of named rapids.
Connor, what's up? How you doing, buddy?
No matter what craft you're on, everyone shares a common goal: to go for the biggest thrill without flipping the boat. Underlying the fun is a sense of anticipation. With a 13-foot drop in elevation, Lava Falls' powerful hydraulics has earned it a reputation of being the most daunting.
It's big, powerful waves in this rapid, and the lower waves are kicking real good today. They're gonna, if we hit those square, the people on the front are gonna get knocked backwards. Yeah, they should be wet.
Anybody want a shot of vodka? Bring on the river. Bring on the river.
Lava Falls does not disappoint. There's only an instant to contemplate what's coming. As the river commands attention, the moment is all that matters. Coming up, Lonesome Country, a veranda with a view, and a hidden paradise when Inside Grand Canyon National Park continues. In an expanse of endless wonders, 2/3 of Grand Canyon National Park lies north of the Colorado River. Along the north rim, the elevation reaches 8,800 feet, with views all the way to the Painted Desert. Sunrise at Cape Royal reveals a 60-foot opening aptly named Angel's Window. With a higher elevation and more rain and snow, it's lush and green.
This is more of a place to slow down and take it easy.
Only 10% of the park's visitors make it to the North Rim. But for those that do, there's a sense of being the first person to ever see it. For accommodations, there's only one on the rim. The Grand Canyon Lodge was originally built by the Union Pacific Railroad in 1928. The architect, Gilbert Stanley Underwood, had a vision.
He wanted to accomplish something that looked like it fit into the natural environment here. You see it rising out of the rock. He would use the local Kaibab limestone, use some of the lumber from the area, the Douglas fir, the ponderosa pine.
Designed as a destination resort, there's a veranda with a front row seat to the main attraction. Once inside, visitors enter a lofty lobby with a timbered ceiling. One of the first questions they ask is, where's the canyon?
Yes, sir. May I help you?
And that's the way that the architect designed it. You don't get to see it until you descend down the steps into the sunroom, and then you have these beautiful windows that just open up, and it's an awesome view.
Off to the side, a bronze life-size statue of Brighty honors a beloved burro that once roamed the trails. Canyon tradition calls for visitors to rub Brighty's nose for good luck. The lodge draws upon its wild western roots with a saloon dedicated to rough-riding President Teddy Roosevelt. In the main dining room, you can eat with the majesty of the canyon at your table. From an overlook along the rim, you can get close to the canyon. But to get to know it, you need to get down in it. Of the trails that crisscross the canyon, the over 21-mile Kaibab Trail is popular for multi-day treks between the north and south rims.
Well, having experienced it as a younger man, the sort of wilderness experience and the fantastic scenery, I would really want to share that with my children. So my son is old enough to do it now, so he's going to be the first one to do it.
Beyond the beauty, nothing is easy about an elevation loss of over 5,700 feet from the North Rim, or a grinding climb of over 4,700 feet to the South Rim.
It's something that has to be seen and experienced and felt and huffed and puffed, and I'm pooped.
If you have strong legs, stamina, and experience, one way to see the canyon is a feat of endurance known as a rim-to-rim run. Alpine runner Maureen Meyer is well aware of the challenges of an extreme sport.
The canyon is not forgiving. So starting off in the pine trees in the cold, going down through multiple layers of rock, preparation is certainly necessary to make it safely across the canyon.
No matter what pace or trail you take, the #1 rule is to respect the canyon. Every year, rescue rangers respond to over 400 emergencies.
How are you guys today?
Fantastic.
Good. How far down the trail were you planning on going? Or do you know?
No, I don't know.
You
Just
don't know?
whenever I get tired enough that...
Okay.
Bonnie Taylor is a preventative search and rescue ranger whose job is to keep people from getting in too deep.
Hiking until you get tired. Can you tell me what might be wrong with that statement?
I can't hike back out.
Exactly. We actually talk with people and kind of get a feel for where they're planning on hiking, how far down, and see what their itinerary is. If we feel that their itinerary might be a little bit too much for rather the time of day or what they have carried with them. How much water do you guys have with you today?
We're not going very far.
We try to tell them the possibilities of what may happen if they continue on that route. Do please be careful with the flip-flops when you come.
We were going on the bus and we thought,
exactly. Well, thank you very much, you guys. Enjoy the rest of your hike.
Thank you.
We will. We actually like to tell people that Grand Canyon is an inverted mountain. And most people, when they go for a hike, go up first and then down. Well, here, you go down first and then up. That's where they look up and say, I can't do this. They can, just one foot in front of the other.
Coming up, it's all aboard for human-made gems and remote wonders when Inside Grand Canyon National Park continues. In the vast geological wonderland of the Grand Canyon, time seems meaningless. Amid the grandeur, the California condor soars. While most come to revel in the views, hundreds of ancient sites are reminders that the canyon has been a home to people for thousands of years.
In this mud here, you can see fingerprints where someone's patted that mud in, and those are 1,100 to 900 years old.
The ancient ones weren't the only ones to seek out the view. The South Rim has been the tourist hub for the majority of visitors since the turn of the 20th century. The Grand Canyon Village, preserved by the park, tells of a more recent history. A history that opened the Grand Canyon to tourism on a grand scale when the Santa Fe Railroad built a spur line to the South Rim in 1901. Vintage steam and diesel locomotives recreate this historic run daily. When the train pulls into the old depot, the sign says Grand Canyon, and you've arrived. Visitors make the short walk to the rim to gaze upon the great abyss. Most pass by the El Tovar Hotel. This luxury rock and log lodge is one of the most celebrated of all national park lodges. It was built by the railroad.
Has sort of a Swiss chalet look, which looks a little out of place to some in this area, but I think the people that were vacationing at the time, wealthy Americans, were used to going to Europe, and that's the kind of thing they expected at the end of the line, so I think that may have played a part.
Booking a room here takes advanced planning, but you don't have to be a registered guest to enjoy El Tovar. One of its biggest attractions isn't inside, it's outside, on the porches and side veranda, where you can kick back just like people have done for over a century. Many of the canyon's early visitors had their trips preserved on film thanks to the work of two enterprising shutterbugs from Pennsylvania, Ellsworth and Emery Kolb. The Kolb brothers lived and worked at the head of Bright Angel Trail. From a small window in their studio, they once photographed mule riders that included Teddy Roosevelt, the president who preserved the Grand Canyon as a national monument in 1908. The Kolb brothers were also canyon explorers. They were the first to ride the Colorado River with a movie camera in the winter of 1911 to 1912. It was a rough trip. The brothers braved swift currents, storms, and frigid temperatures. The hardship paid off. The film was a hit. It played inside their South Rim studio for over 60 years. Today, their studio is a bookstore and gallery. The National Park Service maintains their private quarters. Tours require advance reservations. Emery Kolb lived here until his death at the age of 95, where he enjoyed his own private view. Beginning in 1905, architect Mary Coulter left her mark with structures that tell of the canyon's past. West of Grand Canyon Village, Hermit's Rest is a highlight.
If we look across Hermit Canyon, you look farther down at the river, there is Hermit Rapid. You have Hermit Canyon, you have Hermit Gorge below us. This whole area was named after a man they considered to be a hermit, Louis Boucher.
Nestled into the side of the canyon, Hermit's Rest was made to look like Boucher's refuge. The Grand Canyon has been a home to Native Americans for centuries. Built on the highest point of the South Rim, the Desert View Watchtower is Mary Coulter's masterpiece. Designed after an ancestral pueblo in ruin, she even recreated a ruin alongside it.
She labored to integrate her structures with the surroundings, and in particular the living rock, using available materials. In fact, in a few of her structures, Desert View Watchtower in particular, she's actually used rock art panels as building material.
Inside, walls are decorated with Native American symbols and pottery. A winding staircase leads up to an observation area. From here, the majestic panorama is a feast for the eyes. Coming up, a watery oasis.
Coming down here for the first time is definitely a shocker to most people.
And a plunge into a turquoise pool when Inside Grand Canyon National Park continues. It may surprise you to learn that the Grand Canyon isn't all national park land. Along the park's borders, Native Americans are the caretakers of the country. The land of the Havasupai on the southern boundary is a paradise. Where there are no paved roads, a flight over magnificent red rock backcountry is the easiest and most scenic way to get there. Deep within Havasu Canyon, the village of Supai operates a heliport. It's here the Havasupai have made their home for centuries. Filled with lush vegetation and towering trees, the pace is slow and easy. For a place to stay, there's a rustic lodge and a campground. Havasupai means the people of the blue-green waters. From the village, it's a moderate hike to a backcountry Shangri-La.
Coming down here for the first time is definitely a shocker to most people because you have the waterfalls, you have the red rock, you have the blue water, you have the green around. It looks like a Hawaii / Caribbean island / Grand Canyon, and you just don't know what to think at first.
The first of the falls seems like it has to be the best. At Navajo Falls, water cascades over gentle tears. And it's just the beginning. A trail winds down to the most famous flow. Havasu Falls drops 120 feet into a deep crystalline pool. The striking color comes from the rock itself. Light reacting with the dissolved limestone in the water turns it an incredible shade of turquoise. In a place where the surroundings are superlative, yet another waterfall is on par with the rest. At the majestic Mooney Falls, roaring water drops almost 200 feet. At this heaven on earth, you can swing or kick back on the rocks.
Most people who come here are hikers and adventurers and outdoors people.
For the adventurous, a treacherous trail winds its way up. For those who have to test the waters.
Lock the carabiners. Make sure we're all good to go. Woohoo!
Although not permitted inside the park, a harrowing rappel at Mooney Falls requires special permission from the Havasupai and the proper gear.
Going down, you have more time to absorb the moment, really view the waterfall for itself. You set up an anchor system and go down with a double rope, 11 millimeter, and it's absolutely incredible.
Wherever you take in the waters, from high up or down low, at Havasu Canyon, there's seemingly no end to this Eden. The blue-green waters make their way to more tranquil lower cascades. Eventually, everything flows into the Colorado River. Coming up, saving the Grand Canyon and a grand experiment when Inside Grand Canyon National Park continues. The mighty Colorado River runs a distance of 1,400 miles to the Gulf of California. Along its course, the 277-mile meander through the Grand Canyon is a wonder of the world. Yet, it was almost changed forever.
The Bureau of Reclamation had plans for dams in Grand Canyon, at least two. One downstream from here about 40 miles, the Marble Canyon Dam, and one down around Bridge Canyon, down the lower end of western Grand Canyon.
It was all part of a grand plan to develop the West for water and hydroelectric power. At first, the influential Sierra Club was willing not to oppose the dams for a compromise.
The Sierra Club said, well, we'll let you put dams in the Grand Canyon as long as we have elevators that can get to the bottom so that people can go down there, see the river, and fish.
The fates intervened when one man took a stand. As one of the pioneer river runners, Martin Litton saw firsthand the beauty of this wilderness. When the Sierra Club was willing to settle for a compromise, he saw things differently.
There was a lot of ignorance about the Grand Canyon and about its value. The wilderness, everything natural in this world is being depleted. And if you give up on any part of it, it's gone forever.
Saving this supreme site came down to one critical Sierra Club board meeting in 1963.
Martin Linton stood up and made an impassioned plea for Sierra Club support in opposition to the dam. David Brower, as executive director, was then able to push ahead with a commitment opposing the dams in Grand Canyon.
The Sierra Club launched a major fight for the Grand Canyon.
It took an awful lot of fight from a lot of different groups to keep them from building Marble Canyon Dam. It was one of the seminal moments in the Sierra Club's history.
Congress voted down both proposed dams in the 1960s and 70s. The Grand Canyon was saved. But the victory was bittersweet. With the completion of Glen Canyon Dam upstream in 1963, the Colorado River was radically tamed.
Where you previously had a very sediment-laden, highly variable desert river, it's essentially turned into almost like a mountain stream where it's very, very cold, clear water. A lot of that sediment was key to making sure that the system functioned.
In a novel experiment, scientists periodically opened the generators and bypass tubes of Glen Canyon Dam.
What we tried to do with the controlled floods is to try to reestablish some of the processes that were in place prior to the dam, and also try to reestablish some of the sediment load and rebuild beaches and some of the nearshore habitats.
It's hoped the experimental flows will lessen the impact of the dam on the Grand Canyon. Altering this landscape would have been unthinkable to President Teddy Roosevelt, who once declared it a sight every American should see. It is a Grand Canyon, from beginning to middle to end.
I enjoy it for the changes. It's almost like art comes to life.
Once in a lifetime, do it. You gotta do it.
It's just phenomenal. It's so huge. We're not going to fully ever understand it, which is kind of nice.
To get to know the Grand Canyon even a little, you need to hike it. Ride in and out of it. Make the Great River run through the heart of it. Explore its remote backcountry and hidden side canyons. Take time to revel in the blue-green waters. While the spectacular view draws the eye outward, you might not be aware of a parallel world of wildlife. The bobcat, named for its short bob tail, blends into the red rock. For over 100 years, getting to the top and bottom of it has meant hopping aboard another local. These long-eared taxis have been used for hauling supplies and human cargo since the 1890s. This is one of a few places where you'll find working mules. A cross between a donkey and a horse, the unique breeding makes them ideal for the job. And they bring their own personalities to it.
A lot of mules will be real sweet and gentle.
Okay.
And you'll come across some other mules that might be a little more ornery.
Come on, Joe. Get up here.
We have ambition.
It's called the Supreme Spectacle, yet nothing prepares you for the grandeur of the Grand Canyon. From exposed rock, millions of years in the making,
Bring on the river.
to the powerful blast of a river unleashed. Over the next hour, we'll travel from rim to hike hidden canyons, plunge into ancient pools, and giddy up and go to get an insider's view of one of the wonders of the world. Stretching as far as 18 miles from rim to rim, the Grand Canyon spreads across the northwest corner of Arizona. Each year, millions of visitors from all over the world come to view the stair-step labyrinth of monoliths, where the ever-changing patterns of color and light are an inspiration. Many experienced canyoneers get their bearings from the multitude of rocky peaks called temples. Some have exotic names like Osiris, Buddha, and Zoroaster, after Eastern deities and religions.
Well, there's over 100 named peaks and temples and buttes here, any one of which, in my humble opinion, you could pluck out of the canyon, set down in the middle of Kansas, and you'd have a national monument in its own right.
Described as a gigantic Venus flytrap, this vertical park, with a 1-mile drop to the bottom, draws people in. The minute you step off the rim, it's a rugged environment where distances are deceptive.
People tend to underestimate the canyon and how far things really are. For instance, behind me here is Plateau Point. It is 6 miles one way from the beginning of the trail. And most people, if you ask them on the top, think it's about 1.5 miles to 2 miles down the trail.
For those who want to explore the extreme backcountry with people in the know,
watch your footing, because it's kind of a little bit loose.
the Grand Canyon Field Institute has been working with the park since the 1990s. Multi-day guided hikes allow time to delve deeper.
Every one of these is probably a fossil, it's just that one still has the pattern in it.
Then, it's off to places where there's a whole new perspective.
Vicious mules here, we have lazy mules here. They're a lot different, just like my crew.
The South Rim Blacksmith Shop and Mule Barn date back to 1906. Saddles here are still made the old-fashioned way.
We do all our sewing by hand. It holds up better. It's the same kind of saddle that was used 100 years ago.
And shoes are required. No mule is allowed to go into the canyon without them. A blacksmith keeps them shod, a traditional task he claims doesn't hurt.
The mule's hoof's made out of the same thing your fingernail's made out of. The only thing you can really screw up and affect them is if you don't level the foot right. They'll get cracks in their foot, they're more likely to stumble.
Once they're shod and saddled, they're good to go. But before they take on a paying customer, all mules go to school. Wranglers ride